Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Camille Billops. I am a visual artist and co-founder with my husband James Hatch of the Hatch Billops collection.
And Hatch Billops was founded not here, but when we were together at UCLA and began to realize how important it was to collect black theater and cinema history and preserve it and put it in books for distribution. So we got married and did that. I got a job teaching in New York University, and so we moved here. And, there it is in Harlem. But they hadn't done, well, there was Schaumburg, but the university itself hadn't done much to preserve things. Though people there were very nice, and there was a lot of color around. So we started to do it ourselves. We used it in class. And we started the collection of tapes. And I'll show you there, what are there, 400 tapes now?
I don't know.
I don't know, there's a lot of them anyway. And what we did was set up a program called Artist and Influence. And we would take any artist of any quality, or in other words, writers, musicians, whatever. And we would transcribe them and publish them. And that turned out to be a really good decision because the thing was popular. And Alexander Street Press, which I had never heard about, but then they approached us about taking the entire collection and putting it on television for people to read. And they would use it in universities and charge people royalties. And they did. And they've been very good, honest people, so we get royalty every year, and we appreciate that. And the collection gets wide distribution in colleges all over the United States and some in Europe. And you can go to it without paying the tuition, but you can't get away with it for very long. In other words, we don't get that. Alexander Street Press handles all that bureaucracy, thank goodness.
Each one has its own uniqueness. And one of the first persons we were in Taiwan on a grant. And the head of the organization was Wu Jinji, and who was also responsible for mailing it out of Taiwan, because otherwise you needed a permit. So they just put it in with the household stuff. But he was one of the first ones. Everybody's unique unto themselves. That's why you pick them. Some were maybe they were all different, but they were all I think highly valued. Didn't you say that, Hummy?
Right. We tried to get people who hadn't been interviewed to death, and though we always glad they got the famous one because they would help the whole collection by being in it,
Like Baby Sanchez Davis. Sammy's mother, and at that time her mother was still alive, and she was in her late 70s or 80s or something. And the only thing that requirement that she had was that we not talk about Sammy, because there was all of this friction between the father and her and all of that. So she said if you restricted it, we could do it, and which we did. And then we had a few of the other Cotton Club dancers come down, and they brought their little tutus. They weren't putting them on. And they got up here and danced. Those old women were 80-something years old. They were up here just beating that floor, So those were exciting things. Who else, Jim? We've got over, 400?
Yeah, yes.
Faith Ringo, well-known black artist. Morgan and Marvin Smith. We do other artists, not necessarily all African American. people we think that would be of interest to the African American community also. We did, he owned the Cookery. There was that restaurant that was on University Place and 8th Street. Barney Josephson, he owned the original Cafe Society where Adam got married. And so we interviewed him. He talked about his brother, who was involved in some kind of political activity during that time, and he was arrested for being involved in a plot to kill Hitler. So we had that. We had Pro Primus. We had what was Adam's first wife? Hazel. Was it Hazel Bryant? Who was that? No, that was another person.
Yeah.
Hazel Scott.
Yeah, some people we interviewed twice. Jimmy Owens, who traveled
Trumpeter.
the world a lot, of course, and had a lot of stories, and a great trumpet player. And we interviewed him very early in our history, and about 10 years later, he said, "You haven't interviewed me lately," and 10 years going by, and we did it again, only this time using his wife as the interviewer, and so it has a quality of its own. But Jimmy also he knew every trumpet player that was alive, I think, and this happened to different people, but where we would get recommended to somebody's buddy, which would give us another interview we wouldn't have thought about or wouldn't have gotten or something.
And famous photographers, Roy de Carava, and the young people came, and they all sat on the floor, and they sat around him like they were sitting around Jesus. It was, some things were really very exciting, some weren't. We did Dizzy, and we had to go get him in Jersey. And he pointed to his luggage to me to get his bags. And I just decided, well, I bent over like you scratch your butt and say, "Yes, sir." I wanted to say, I ain't no baggage carrier. But anyway, so we brought him in and everybody loved it and all of that. We did Amiri Baraka early, and the audience was filled with white kids. Young white kids on the floor, just in the adoring position of when Baraka was relatively young. I also at one point began to sell his work, his drawings. I don't know if you know that he was a wonderful, naive artist.
No, I had no idea.
Oh, yes. Yes, we sold a lot of that work. Yeah, we went out to his house, and he would bring it out in a box. And because he was a naive artist, so anything went. And I looked in that box, and it looked like garbage. And then you looked a little closer, and a little closer, and you went, "Whoa, what is this?"
About to get it.
Yeah, but you do get it. It does
I
have
do,
words.
yes.
Yeah,
There's a power to it.
yeah, sure it is. And who else? So many people. So many people. Or people that were so obscure that nobody knew about them, but they were doing some small thing, and people would come to us. "You need to interview so and so," and we would usually follow it up. We tended to listen to a lot of people, and they did not have to be famous. They had to be interesting, But sometimes we sat up here with people who were very super famous, weren't they? I'm trying to even remember who they were. Well, when we did these Chinese young men here, that was really the beginning of Asian American theater. They were beginning to make their mark. And what was that? Was it David Henry Hwang? M. Butterfly.
Right.
So he was still young. They were all young. And then they got famous. They get famous. They don't speak no more. They don't remember those days or whatever it was. But we did it, and we encouraged people to document themselves, to empower themselves. And because many times the people who are in power won't let you in. You know, you don't get to, no. And so that's what we tried to have, was an open house, an open,
Yeah, we started out in the very beginning of charging people, all these were Sunday afternoon interviews, and charging people, and it didn't work. I mean, your mother and father and brother would come, but, you know, we couldn't. Then we opened it up, and that changed everything. So almost every interview, we had all we needed for the audience. Anything from 20 to 60 people, depending, you know, how famous the person was or how many friends he had. And we developed skills as interviewers because we hadn't started out in life to be interviewers, right? But you start with, you know, get basic facts: born, when, mother, all that business. And then gradually we learned how to research a little and find out information, and even springing questions on them that they might not expect.
we also, what we did, which was a very important thing, is to get stories before the story changed. Like, who started the Studio Museum in Harlem? And you know, there's a lot of people up there saying, oh, I did this and I did that. So Betty Blayton Taylor was one of the early founders. At the time, she was working with the Museum of Modern Art with a children's program. And through that, they were able to get grant money to start something in Harlem, as if, well, they maybe don't want you to stay downtown, because you go uptown. But all the people who were involved, people who were in the early board, all of that, we did it. And when Mary Campbell took over, I said, better get it down. And I said, people are going to change the story. So we got the beginnings of things. Who was there? Who was not there? When somebody died? What were the audiences at that time? What was the art that they were showing? Because it was during a whole militant time where everything was defined by black this or whatever it was at that time. But the artist who initially started the first show was an abstract artist. And the Studio Museum was beginning to develop that whole question about what was black and what was not, and who was in and who was not, this and that. But we did that, and it was so important. People come here now to look at, well, when did this start? When was this? Who was there? And that became a very important part of who did what when. And it continues to be. People still come to the files to go back to the 70s. We also have a big, long clipping file. We also have a very long, extended photographic file of when we shot pictures of people. And we now maybe there's 4,000 photos or something. And the clippings and the slides. I shot shows. I shot every show I could get of Romy's. Now, I did not have release to go around selling those slides, which I didn't attempt to anyway. But I documented that what was being shown, who was there. And you go back now and people are dead, are gone. And you just look at it and you say, this is really something. We did at that time, the older artists who were possibly in their 70s, in the 70s, right? Like Selma Burke. She is credited with having done the dime. Well, and she lived. Selma was this outrageous, wonderful, huge black woman who was known to be riding motorcycles in Europe with white males. I mean, not like it's some common thing, but she had power. and she was a nurse. And she used to take care of this old white lady, and they would ride around the park, Central Park. And when they got to that one that led up to Harlem, this woman would tell Selma, "Don't go up there. There are Negroes up there." And all of these stories you gather through talking to people about their lives and who did what and who did the. But she was accredited for having done the dime, but she really did the deeds building. She didn't do the dime. John Sinnott did the dime. So I spent a lot of time digging that up and do all of this. But you get a flavor of going back in time with them. And then you end up, I was just looking in her file the other day for some information, and it meant that you visited during that time. You wore them. You found out things. Or when Bob Blackburn was riding in Europe with Eva, what was her name? Eva Helfand, riding motorcycle in Europe. This black man with that white woman on the back of the motorcycle in the 40s. I mean, and Bob started the printmaking workshop. And still, I got to talk to Eva Helfand. I got to talk to Selma. I got to talk to so many that the files are filled with going back. That you got to go back that far in those books to find them. Mr. Wells, all of them, of when they were young, when they were Howard University's art department was the place where a lot of the contemporary African American art was born. There, it's a high, it's a power that you got to know them before they died. You know, so I got to talk to Mr. Wells just before he got famous again. And I said, "Mr. Wells, I got $1,000. I said, would this buy me 4 year old prints?" He said, "Yeah." Man, I got those prints, Jack. I got them. And a gallery person came here and she looked at that print, and it was one of the few etchings he did. He did woodcuts. And she said, "Anything you ask, I'll give you for that print." And I said, "I don't think so. You should have been there when I was getting $4,000. I mean, going back or with Owen Dodson at Selma Burke's. And Owen was a little tipsy and I had to help him go to the loo. But he wasn't enamored by her because he was her contemporary. But I'm worshiping all of them. I'm saying, wow, man, I'm sitting here with Owen. And now I'm Owen's age. You know, but to have passed through that was forever changing. That you did that, and you didn't think you were doing a big deal, but you were making history. And Lynn Igo, who did that book of that encyclopedia of African American art, she came here to get some of her information. And she used a certain notebook I had. She don't throw that out. She says it's now incorporated in my book as a source. And then I said, "Can I write the foreword for your book?" I had some chutzpah. She said, "Sure." And I did. You know, you learned how history was made. You learn that you can make history, that you can establish yourself or somebody you love historically if you put it on good paper. Maybe one day somebody finds it. That person is not the only history maker. That this one, all this is about obscure people, odd people, papers and notes of things that you leave that somebody finds and said, "Oh, this is an empowerment." And there's so many people who say, "You can't come in here. We ain't gonna put you in our book. You're not important." You say, "Yes, I am." And you can do that. And that's what we did with Mr. VanDerZee. I have so many tapes of him talking about his past. And it's in those fabulous tapes in there. that you go back. Or you go with Owen, or you go with Norman Lewis and his friend Wally Natters. And those two Negroes are dirty mouth black men in this back there talking about how that man, and blah blah blah. Remember that? And blah, and also tapes of Baraka, going back to the 70s and late 60s. You can make history. Everybody can.